And that's sort of where we end up. But this gun I think is neat. It's a utility gun. It's versatile, modular caliber wise. And some people will say, well, what am I going to do with that gun? Like, this is the most fun gun you will own, period.
Oh my God. What's going on, everyone? My name is Talon Sai and you are watching Sunday GUNDAY. I hope you guys are all having a great Sunday so far. Today we're doing something pretty drastically different than any other video that I've ever put up here on the channel. Typically I will jump right into a product review or a review of a firearm. Today, however, the video is going to be sort of like in podcast form or maybe an interview form. I had the opportunity to sit down a few weeks ago with one of the masterminds behind this beautiful mini rifle right here. This is the Mini Fix from Q. This has been sort of one of those unicorn guns for me, one that I've wanted to get my hands on for so long, and I love all of the engineering aspect behind this thing. But as you probably know, a lot of Q products are very difficult to get because it's hard to keep them in stock. So on the first leg of my road trip a few weeks back, I was able to swing by Q in New Hampshire, and I had the chance to sit down and talk with Kevin from Q for about 3 days. We actually did a lot of cool things while I was up there. We had the chance to shoot a little bit together. We talked about all of the products, and we even got to like skateboard and hang out and stuff like that. Now I know this video is going to be pretty long. Like I mentioned, it's sort of podcast style, so I'm leaving it relatively uncut. I hope you guys learned something from it. I hope it's entertaining for the most part. And with all that being said, let's jump right into the interview. Alright guys, so today I'm sitting down with Kevin Brittingham up here in New Hampshire. So how's it going, man?
Man, it's good. It's good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me up here, and I'm glad we finally got the chance to meet and hang out for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you made it.
So can you explain to people who you are and what you do? Because I would put my own labels on it, but I'm curious, like, what do you tell people when they ask who you are and what you do?
Well, you said I'm Kevin Brittingham. So currently I am the Chief Innovation Officer for Q, and Q is a firearms company that I founded. I formerly founded a company called Advanced Armament, and it was focused on primarily silencers, but that's where we developed the 300 blackout cartridge and the Honey Badger firearm and several other things. I mean, I guess it's what I do. I don't know. I mean, now I own the company, and I don't run daily operations any longer because we're kind of focusing on production.
Right.
But we started in 2016, and the first 4 years was heavy on design and innovation. And so now we're trying to capitalize by focusing the next couple years on production. And so, you know, I'm technically actually the Chief Marketing Officer as well. So I love that part of it, and we don't have salespeople for our company, and so I guess like my job now is being an advocate for the company and trying to explain stuff and reach people like yourself to where we can get content on the products out there.
When you have products like this, they kind of speak for themselves, sell themselves.
Yeah.
You don't need marketing, or you don't need people to talk about how awesome they are. They kind of just are what they are.
We've been fortunate, and I tell you, and I were talking earlier, and you know, my passion for firearms is the innovation. Whether it's we're doing stuff for the commercial market or doing stuff for the armed forces or the government, I love the innovation part. So when it comes to production, like, that's a harder thing for me to really get into, and I'm not as good at it. And then I'm pretty good at the marketing side. So it's kind of what I do now, is just big picture stuff. I deal with the dealers and distributors and content creators, and I try to think of the future of the company. And we've already developed 5 or 6 other things that'll come out in the future. And sometimes, you know, it's dependent upon all kinds of events and resources. But it's interesting because we started 4 years ago right at this time.
Yeah.
And everyone thought Hillary was going to get elected. And so we did the fixed rifle. So the full-size fixed rifle, which there's one over here. And one of the reasons, we'd wanted to do this gun for a long time, but seriously and honestly, one of the reasons was the fear of Hillary Clinton getting elected and going after firearms.
Okay.
That this was a bolt gun. It would be one of the last things commercially that would be regulated or banned, if you have a fear of that.
Right.
And it was the first product that I've ever done that we could sell in California.
Okay, so that's one of the questions that I was going to ask. I was curious what brought the fix to life, because this is obviously the main focus of what I want to talk about. In the future, this is a mini fix right here. A lot of people ask me, if you could have any gun, what would it be? You guys know I have more guns than I really care to own. And this is one that has been on my list for a long time. And it's kind of rare that I want a firearm, but this is one of them. So
yeah,
that's sort of the inception of it. I understand now why you built it. Really cool reason as well. I mean, it's...
Well, that's one. There's been a need. The bolt action was a place where there wasn't much innovation. You see in the last 20, 25 years, chassis come about for a Remington-style gun, which is modeled on the Mauser.
So that's all drop-in stuff. It's just kind of...
Yeah, kind of bolt-on, add-on stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the bolt gun hadn't really been touched since the 1800s. There's all these little modifications, but there's not been... They're made the same way they were made before World War I. So there hadn't been, modern manufacturing involved in making a new action. No one had devoted the resources, which seemed crazy because Remington has sold 12,700,000.
That's crazy numbers.
Yeah, and it's a great gun for its time, but there's something better that could be done, and that was this exercise. And it really kicked off, actually, when I owned Advanced Armament and then sold to Remington, and we developed... a sniper rifle for SOCOM when I was there, and it was still a Remington-based action, but there were improvements. It was a 3-lug bolt, so it had a 60-degree bolt throw, and that was so much better than the 90-degree bolt throw on 700s. You think about, you got a 90 degrees to work the bolt, so it can interfere with the scope. It makes it slow, more difficult to operate. Now, so we have 45.
Yeah, coming to this now, I mean, that's one of the really cool features about this is the 45-degree throw of this. Like, you can do it almost without even taking your hand off of the grip. Like, there's so many cool things about this, and that's kind of why I wanted to sit down and talk with you about it firsthand. So,
what's so interesting to me is we did the fix, and it was obvious it needed to be done. And I don't know how to categorize it, but you see SIG is already copying it and stuff like that, which is wonderful. But it's a new... what is the rifle? It's a new category to some degree, where we knew all the things that were good and that we wanted to fix based on our experience and our capabilities. And, in my engineering team, our love of innovation and how do we make a better product. And with the bolt gun, we had to start from scratch. But this seemed obvious, but the mini fix was funny. We're sitting around talking about it. And it's like, I want to do this gun. And the question from half of us, including myself to some degree, was what the hell will you do with it?
That's my first impression. If I didn't have any previous knowledge of Q, I look at a bolt gun, regardless of all of the other cool features of it, and I see you're shooting 300 blackout, which is already, there's so much to talk about there, but out of an 8-inch barrel. That's kind of this package alone, when folded up, that's what drew me to it. I'm like, what is that thing for? So why 300 black and why this barrel length? Can you explain? Because I understand it, but for the viewers, why that?
Well, I would say this. Like you have a hunting background. I did not, but people who do, the 30-30 for decades was the basic deer hunting cartridge for those of us that like to hunt whitetail. It's like the poor man's gun, the entry level, the lever action 30-30 is what everyone had, and that is a great utility cartridge. 300 blackout is basically the modern equivalent to that, and it's very similar again to 7.62 by 39, but it fits in an AR magazine. So the minifix, we wanted a detachable magazine. That's one thing. 300 blackout is, well, with silencers being much more prolific now, 300 blackout makes a lot of sense for the subsonic because you can shoot and be silent. Or you can use the supersonic ammo, and so for human-sized targets, deer, pigs, 8-inch 300 blackout, 150 meters, great hunting cartridge. Yeah. And 99% of the things that are shot in hunting are inside of 150 meters. And so then what else bothers us? You know, with a hunting rifle, oh, they're big, they're heavy, they're bulky, they're too long to use in a blind. We can do 8-inch barrels now. This one is actually an SBR. You see it has the stock on it, but now with the development and wide, spread success of the arm brace, we sell this as a pistol, and it'll ship with. We're able to do it with 8-inch barrel because we ship it with an arm brace. So then, if you want to SBR it, you can buy the stock, and you can do this. Then this is also a switch barrel gun. So let's say 300 blackout's not for everybody. Well, there's so many back orders now, it's all we're going to produce. One great thing about the gun, in 2 minutes on this table, you can swap the barrel and caliber out. So all you have to do to convert this to a 223 is order a barrel off the website. And then you can make this a 223.
And he's explaining this very simply, but it really is as easy as that. It's designed in a way where you can simply remove 2 pins up here and just swap it. Like, the tolerances are good enough, and the design with the pins, it's just like snap and go.
Yeah, pretty much. So the idea was to do a gun that didn't have to be hand fitted, but would give you sub MOA accuracy. It would give you everything you needed, but we didn't have to hand fit things. So we have a screw for the handguard, and it's the same way for the barrel. There's a screw that drives the handguard back, which you need. And then there's a slit in the handguard right here. And then there's a screw that goes this way that pinches that. And what it does is take up, this handguard mounts to the receiver, and it squeezes when you do this screw and takes up all the tolerance as if it were a press fit or hand fit. So every time you just loosen that screw, and then it separates a little, you can pull the handguard off. And the barrel is the same way. Like on an AR-15, there's a barrel nut, and there's a barrel nut on this gun, but with the AR-15 you have to put it in a vise and torque it. The torque requirement requires that there's a vise to be able to torque it on and off.
This, you could do it sitting here at the table by hand.
That's correct. So you can do it by hand. The way we get away with that is we also have a pinch and a screw on the receiver that when you use the barrel nut just to get the barrel in position, and then the pinch squeezes the receiver and takes up all of the tolerance. So it's like a press fit. And that's the way it works. And it's a very simple, robust, repeatable way to change a barrel out. Like we could do a fast attach, like super fast quick change barrel, but then the gun gets bigger, heavier, less accurate. There's compromises. So this was the best way.
And then speaking of doing that stuff without unnecessary tools and things like that, the suppressor systems, you have the spread of silencers out there. Trash Panda, I already did a video on that, so if you guys want to check it out, there's a link up in the corner there. But that just goes to show, like, you are putting standard flat wrench.
Oh yeah, so
like the tapers make it so that you can do it all by hand, and it's still super secure. There's so many good things about that.
There's a lot of science and engineering in this gun. I think this is the most innovative gun in at least a generation. Everything that's in the gun, and we didn't invent a lot of stuff. There is a lot of intellectual property in the mechanism and the firing mechanism and the way the bolt works to be able to get the 45-degree throw. But it's not like we went and invented a lot of things. It's well thought out. We put a lot of things together that were obviously not, they weren't obvious to other manufacturers. But with the silencers, simple tapers. So it's almost a self-locking taper. So when you screw it on, the taper gives you alignment. And it's just like any machine tool, a lathe or a mill, it's the same way. That's how they align stuff to cut parts. And then we wanted to use, so it requires 20% more torque to remove it than it does to install it. So you can put it on by hand, where you can crank it on, it never comes loose. And you may even need a wrench to remove it. So we have standard wrench flats on the back.
That's actually happened to me when I was filming the video. I was like, man, that thing is on there now.
Yeah, if you crank it on, you can do it so hard you have to have a tool to remove it because it's 20% more. And then, if you put it underneath the handguard, there's also one on the front, so you can access it there.
Very cool.
And I think everything with the gun, as you start to go through the gun, you'll recognize that. Like every screw in the gun is custom made, and it's a T25, so a torque.
Every single screw, every screw on it.
Yeah, so that's the only thing you need for every screw on the entire gun, whether it's the adjustment for the stock, whether you're changing out the top rail for a shorter one, or you're adding accessory rails to our Q-sert, which this was another thing that was thought out. Like Q-sert is a system that we use. As you see on the Honey Badger, there's M-LOK, and M-LOK is great, and it was an improvement over Keymod. Q-sert's an improvement over this.
Yeah, so Q-sert are these little threaded inserts. This almost looks like M-LOK, like the pattern of the cutouts, but the way you are mounting this, or with accessories, is through these anchor points here. And you mentioned that these anchor points can hold 900 pounds of force.
Everyone's 900 pounds of pull.
So they're of pulls. Okay, so they're pressed in from the underside there,
Yeah.
and I could, if in theory, if there was something threaded on there, I could hang from it.
900 pounds.
900 pounds, which
Yeah.
is insane.
It's insane. It's way more than M-LOK. It's more simplistic. It's fewer parts. And we're able to make the rail thinner and it still be strong because you're relying on the stainless steel threads. You know, an M-LOK is a great design, but you know, Magpul's a plastics company that did it so they could mold it in plastic as well, so it has to be thicker, and there's less material removed for M-LOK. So for instance, the full-length handguard that comes on the standard fix, or you can buy on the website, has 39 of these Q-serts pressed into it. 39 pieces of stainless steel, and it's 2 ounces lighter than the M-LOK handguard.
So it's not only lighter, but it's also stronger, so it's pretty much better in every way.
Yeah, and we learned that through when we did at Remington. M-LOK wasn't around then. We were doing the rifle for special operations, and Remington did a similar thing, and you've seen it maybe on some Geisley rails. I think they're no longer doing them, but they were for like the HK, and then you get them for the M4, where they had this thread things, but they would use Healy coil, and then they pressed in, and those failed, and that was difficult. Yeah. And then they pressed in time certs, and that's a piece that's already exists that you press in from the front, but if the tolerances weren't exactly right, they would pull out.
Yeah.
So we knew we needed to design a system like that to where you pressed in from the back and you had a shoulder and anchor on the back.
That way you can't pull it out.
Yeah, you have to rip the aluminum.
The actual metal.
Yeah, and so, but then, you know, for instance, there's nothing easy about this, and we didn't do it to be different. And it's the best way to mount product. It's just 2 screws, you torque it, and it stays forever. But for instance, we had to develop the machine to press those in. So we had to develop that, and our engineers designed the machine and made the machine that presses all of these in.
Okay, so it's very specific to you then.
Yeah, it's specific to us, but we're going to start making AR rails, and we're going to open source it for people to be able to make accessories. And we have some accessories available now. Yeah. But it was just the best way. So I think if you think in terms of the company, and especially this gun, the thought and the effort that went into everything. Would I do that again? Like, I'm not even sure. But now I'm so glad because it's been a nightmare to get into production. But I'm so glad we did because it was the best thing. But for instance, the original guns that we took to SHOT Show in 2017 took 4 hours to press all the Q-serts in each handguard. and now it takes 4 minutes to build a handguard with the machine.
Awesome.
So, but that's one example. With this gun, we wanted to be modular and give someone the ability to, you know, modify and do different things to the gun, but wanted it to be practical. We wanted the gun to be super lightweight. So the full-size fix in 308 is just over 6 pounds. It's fully adjustable folding stock, like all these great features. So all we did with this gun is essentially take a 1/2 inch out of the center. And so the gun weighs 4.5 pounds. It's got a lot of parts commonality with the full-size fix. In 2 minutes you could put in a 223 barrel, you could buy a longer handguard, you could buy a full-length top rail or a short top rail. We have direct scope mounts coming out where we do away with 1913.
Cool.
We wanted AR controls for the gun, so AR style safety and mag release, and this takes AR mags.
Before we actually get into this, one more thing about the barrel. Obviously, when we're talking about ballistics, in order for something to be efficient, you want the round, no matter what it is, to obviously dump its energy, hitting the target, inside the target, and then in a perfect world, fall out the backside.
Yeah, that would be perfect when you shoot an animal.
Self-defense, anything.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
What you did was tested the twist rates of barrels in order to perform with 300 blackout.
Yeah, so these are 1 in 5, and that's very fast by most standards. It's not really fast. I mean, in a new cartridge, we've tested all the way down to 1-in-1 twist.
But the issue with that is that bullets are opening.
Bullets come apart, so we have to design
expanding.
bullets. There's always a balance. So with 300 blackout, we would have gone with a faster twist, and for a couple of reasons. One's what you're mentioning. People always think of energy with just linear velocity and your bullet weight. Well, velocity isn't just linear. When you're spinning the bullet, that's what stabilizes it and makes it accurate.
Especially a long style bullet like 300 black. You need something to spin that to keep its trajectory.
Yeah, for the long, the subsonic bullets are about twice as long as the supersonic ones. So when they're long combined with being slow, subsonic, you need to spin them fast to get accuracy.
So the 1-in-5 is basically giving it the best ballistic advantage when talking about 300 blackout specifically.
Ballistic and accuracy. So the subsonic, our goal is always to get sub-MOA with subsonic. That's never been done until a new cartridge that we're working on now. With 300 blackout, we came to a crossroad. When we got to 1-in-4, a lot of the pre-existing bullets would expand out of the barrel. We were spinning them so fast.
Like the all copper rounds, yeah, they're actually opening.
So at 1-in-5, and it was a bullet that had already been selected by some law enforcement, and at 1-in-5 they wouldn't do that, and we're getting the best accuracy. So that's why we stopped at 1-in-5. Now, if it wasn't a 30 caliber bullet, and it was brand new, and we were starting from scratch from the beginning, we'd spin it faster. Because not only do you get the accuracy with the subsonic, because the fast twist and a short barrel is what you need to stabilize it to get accuracy, but you get more energy. And so it's not just linear, like I was saying, it's also the rotational energy. So when we speed up the RPMs, that delivers more energy on target. And I showed you yesterday, Discrete Ballistics, we did some gelatin tests with them. So if you go to the Discrete Ballistics Instagram page, got the video of a gelatin block on top, and there's two, one on the bottom.
I'll throw it in right here.
And the only difference in the rounds that are fired is one is spun 1-in-4 and one is 1-in-7.
And it's crazy, just looking at that clip, it literally like changes the cavity dramatically.
Yeah, it's
very dramatic.
3 times the trauma.
Yeah.
So the difference in the initial wound cavity, it's 3 times. Yeah. So just spinning the bullet 1-in-4 twist as opposed to 1-in-7. Jeez.
Dogs.
Dogs.
So that's already kind of showing how functional something like this could be, because a lot of people look at it, they're like, oh, short barrel, that doesn't make sense to me, but the accuracy shows literally on paper. So moving back even more to like the back half of this gun, we'll say, this is, in my opinion, most people on paper, technically speaking, a very much custom gun. There's only 2 real parts on here that are taken from anywhere else, being the pistol grip and just the spring inside the magazine release.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything else has been engineered, designed in a very specific way to be what it is.
It's true. Like, for instance, initially we wanted to use the off-the-shelf mag catch and the off-the-shelf selectors for the AR for both fixed guns, and it made sense because we're going to use those mags. But what we found that I think people don't realize, for an AR, for instance, there's mil-spec tolerances that you're supposed to use. Like, most companies don't know them, don't know how to do tolerance stacking, and don't follow them. And the problem can be if we got selectors.
There's inconsistencies.
Yeah, inconsistencies, and you could potentially get in a position where the gun wasn't safe because they were so out of spec. So we don't even allow you to put standard AR selector barrel in these guns anymore. It's smaller and it won't fit.
So this looks like a Radian Talon selector. However, it's a little bit different. Like you said, the barrel of them, they're slightly different. So keeping safety in mind, that's one of the main reasons for that. Yeah,
so it's just the pistol grip now, and the spring and the mag catch are the only off-the-shelf items for that gun.
That's awesome. And let's talk about the trigger too, because internally here, this is something that I found really cool. This thing is also designed with safety in mind.
Yeah, so safety is obviously a huge concern, and if anybody that's been in the industry for a decade or so, Remington, about once every 10 years, it pops up where Remington, there's a big lawsuit against Remington because they knew some triggers in the 700s were not safe, and they sold the guns anyway and stuff. Safety has to be a huge concern. And so to me, going with an AR style safety is one way to do that. But it also has to be incorporated in the design. Now, everyone wants a super light, crisp, awesome trigger. Depending on the design, you can really sacrifice safety in doing that. Like in my 700s.
You could make some killer triggers, but it's going to be very dangerous.
Yeah, potentially it can be. And especially you get gunsmiths that work on don't know what they're doing. And with the 700s, like all the 700 based guns, there's a receiver and there's a hole in the back of the receiver, and the trigger pack, which has the trigger and the sear and everything in it, is pinned to the receiver. And so that tolerance is huge. So when I have some 700s that have way less than 2-pound triggers. They're not safe. I know this, so I don't even use the safety. I just put the gun, the bolt in the first position, and it's safe, and I don't close it until I want to fire.
Gotcha.
And so that's the way I overcome it. That's not a realistic solution for selling a gun.
Right.
So with this, what we did is, this is the first bolt action where the sear isn't in the trigger, in the receiver, or with a trigger pack.
It's actually all found back here in the bolt housing? Is there
the bolt body, bolt
body.
housing, whatever you want to call it. So it's actually machined at the same time with the striker. So the sear position and hole and the striker positioning is all machined at one time. So we can hold that a super tight tolerance. And what that means to you, or the customer, and where that's great, is all this trigger does, when you pull this trigger, it just goes up and touches the sear.
And the internal piece of this, which I'll show you guys right here, it's actually weighted to be the same.
Yeah, so it's just perfectly balanced, that trigger, and I'll tell you what that means. But the great thing about this is we don't have to have a big tolerance down here, because all that sear does is go up, or all the trigger does go up and hit the sear, and so all your firing mechanism is in the bolt body. It's not split into two different parts that you're mating together, if that makes sense. Now the trigger is incredibly simple, but there is a big mass on the front of the trigger. And if you think about, like, I'm sure you probably have a Glock. So they have one of the safeties is a trigger safety, the little spring-loaded piece on that. For people that don't know, what that's for is if you inadvertently drop your gun, so the leverage from the trigger, it wants to fire all the time. Inertia wants to fire.
Inertia will pull the trigger, especially in aftermarket triggers too. If they're a little bit too heavy and the shoe is heavier than normal, it could do something like that. Yeah,
and so Glock, one of their remedies, which wasn't actually new, but it's great, and I love Glock, they did a great job, is they have that little spring-loaded piece that's ultra lightweight that block, it's just a trigger block, so you can't do that. So we didn't want to have to do that with this gun, but we wanted a super light, crisp trigger. And also machining the sear and the body to where it holds the striker at the same time, where it's able to be incredibly crisp. Because a lot of people don't realize, like, trigger weight, if you just talk about weight, it's a little bit of, it's misleading, and I think people do it in ignorance sometimes. Like the trigger being crisp feels much lighter than the actual pull weight. That's the best solution is when you have a very crisp trigger and it's reasonably light. But so with this, we wanted to perfectly balance the trigger, meaning if you take a standard AR trigger out and you put it on the trigger pin and you spin it, it's always going to end up like this.
Because the weight's on the bottom, right?
That's right. So with this one, you put it on the trigger pin and you spin it, it stops in a random spot every time.
Trigger could be up, down, left, right. It could be any position.
And where that's important is if you drop the gun. Let's say you've got the safety off, the gun's loaded, something happens, you drop the gun. The gun hits the butt, you don't want to fire and shoot you or somebody else. So no matter the position, the trigger is never biased by that inertia to fire because it's perfectly weighted.
Very cool. And that's all stuff done through engineering.
Yeah.
Like most of the things on this gun.
Yeah, and people won't know, but once they see a video like this, but that's the thought that went into the trigger system. And it's whether it's the Honey Badger, which was based on an AR. If you're not going to redesign and rebuild everything, you're always going to have an Achilles heel of the pre-existing project that you start with, or gun, whatever it is. But another thing on here, so this gun's dirty and mine's a prototype actually, but this is when you pull a 700 to full draw, or most bolt guns, just this little piece of the bolt is what's engaged, and so it has to be a super tight fit, and if you run it fast, you can bind it.
Right, so if this is the only piece coming in contact with the gun, it's going to have some wiggle room up and down. This, however, rides almost similar to a pistol, where it's kind of riding on rails. That way, no matter how you push this thing, even if you're giving like force in a direction where you technically shouldn't be, it's still going to move forward.
Yeah.
It's not going to bind up and
doesn't bind, and we don't have to hold super tight tolerances for that to work and be efficient.
Just the 45 action on here, it's just like, it's something that you guys should really feel at some point. Yeah, if it's really cool.
It's good and it's fast, and I hunt and shoot a lot. I hunt a lot. And, and I like semi-autos when it makes sense. Because, there's a lot of times, and anybody that really hunts or shoots living things, you can make the same shot 10 times and different things happen every time. And so follow-up shots are important, and you can make follow-up shots with this gun so quickly. It's far less of a compromise than a standard bolt gun in comparison to a semi-auto in that circumstance.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one gun, or one feature. Another is, just the interchangeability of the bolt handle, which I showed you last night. You can pull it out.
Yeah, it's just one solid piece. You can pull it out if you want something a little bit bigger or whatever it may be, different color.
You don't have to send it to a gunsmith. You could put, so we'll have them here pretty soon that have big knobs on it and stuff like that.
Cool.
What else,
And then, I guess, moving back, we can continue talking about the whole mechanism and everything, but one thing that I personally found pretty interesting is when you obviously fold this thing up, which I'll do now because it's crazy how small this thing is, but the way you designed the folding hinge on here not only keeps this thing insanely compact, but you left room for wear, which I personally found really cool, being into pocket knives. So you can sort of explain that if you want.
Yeah, you made the comparison with your knife last night, but so when you look at the stock when it's unfolded, it almost looks like we didn't fit it properly.
You can almost see daylight through there, but that is by design.
It's a little wedge because any mechanical thing is going to wear. So as this wears over time, it just continues to wedge together. So you'll never get a loose, rattly stock. Nick Schaefer, who's the head engineer on this project, he was very opposed to a folding stock at first because he had never seen a good one.
Okay.
And so Brian McDonald, one of the smartest guys I know, one of our engineers, so 3 months of his life was spent on that hinge. Just that hinge. Wow. That was his, so 6 of us worked on the gun, that was his part. And it was almost crazy to have an engineer that good just do the one thing, but we felt it was that critical to it, and he was perfect for this. And he did a great job. And when I tell people, well, if you look at the Ruger precision gun, which is a cool gun, it's kind of in a different category, but they have a folding stock. Our fully adjustable stock and hinge weigh less than their hinge.
Yeah, and you're not using like quick detach levers or anything, which in my opinion, it's cool that some companies do that, but it's not really necessary. You're going to set this gun up for the optic. You set your cheek weld. Keep in mind with all of the same tools. It's just the one, what is it, a T25?
T25.
Yeah. Everything on here is the same. You set it and you kind of leave it alone. So I think that's a good way to do it. Cuts down weight, makes things simple.
Yeah, and this, you can adjust the butt pad. Like, we didn't want to have a giant butt pad on it that was 8 inches long to keep it compact because normally you only have a few inches of it engaging your shoulder anyway. So if you're shooting prone, you can push this thing up. If you're shooting out of a blind or something, you can set it down. Or
if you're being a wimp, you can get a little squishy one.
Yeah, get the big butt.
Yeah, so interchangeable pieces, same thing. It is adjustable like that too.
Yeah, and the folding stock, locks the bolt handle, which isn't really anything new now. But, so if you're walking through the woods, like this changed bolt guns like you see in probably when you were a kid and hunting, you put the gun over your shoulder, it's on your back, you walk through the woods. And so with this, I sling these like an AR.
Yeah, you got a QD mount, you could literally just carry it across your chest.
Yeah, and that's the way I carry a gun. The stocks just pull through like that. And so, you can shoot around even like that. But, look, this goes into like a standard backpack. The gun is compact and lightweight. What's real funny is this gun is a bit of a compromise. If we started from scratch with it, we would make everything smaller. but it'd be millions and millions of dollars and years of development. So it was easy to bring to market, cutting a 1/2 inch out of the center.
Yeah.
And this is still pounds lighter than anything on the market, but that gun would be 3.5 pounds if we shrunk it down like the way we started with the big gun.
Yeah, and you see companies at SHOT Show obviously making something very similar to this right here. Any kind of PDW honey badger type of clone that's been coming out, they're doing it in their own way, which is whatever. We don't need to talk about that. But something like this to compete with the fix or mini fix, I don't think companies are going to be able to do that for a long time because it takes engineering, dedication. There's just so many things that this will do better than anything competition can do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of great guns out there, but you know, it's just like the honey badger. Like, why does the honey badger cost so much? And you could build an AR for $400. A $3,000 bolt action rifle to some people is ridiculous. I say the fix is the best. It's the best value of anything in a gun store. I know what went into it. It's all new. It's not different for the sake of being different.
It's all thought out and functional.
Yeah, and it was designed as one system from the beginning, where the honey badger is expensive. It was based on the AR platform, and it's evolved over time to where, you know, the receivers are special and they're very expensive to do. The stock and recoil system is completely different. The charging handle is actually different in this one. We with a fast twist barrel. I mean, when we start looking at it, everything in the gun is different except for like the magazine release, and you can put standard AR triggers in it and standard selectors, and
even the charging handle. This one is specific to this gun too. So.
Yeah, so it was, and you know, the same engineering and process went into this. Like AR-15s, I've said it before, they're artificially inexpensive just because of the magnitude and volume of parts out there. But you know, most of the stuff in a lot of guns is not interchangeable. It's not great quality. Everything in this gun is looked at and designed and manufactured the same way we do this one. So, you know, it's just like I've got a Kershaw pocket knife that was $45 that I love a lot. But you know, you've got a custom $400 or $500 pocket knife.
Chris Reeves, Benza, or anything for that matter.
And I love the Kershaw, but when there's no having that and going back, you know, like you can tell a difference. You kind of spoil yourself.
Yeah, you can tell a difference.
And
for sure.
I think, you know, I'm excited when people, I mean, it's flattering for us when big companies start copying the products and trying to mimic things and survive. And, you know, we want to stay focused on innovation and quality and stay pretty nimble. And we don't really worry about what everyone else is doing. But there is a difference. Like when you see this and people do slow twist barrel, well, that's okay. And if you're shooting at your indoor range at 25 meters, probably going to never notice a difference. But, you know, I'll shoot this at 600 meters. You know, we could go out and shoot this at 500 meters with subsonic ammo. I watched, you know, Kit Badger, Ivan, who you know, he just did a review of shooting one of these, and he was getting inch to inch and a half groups at 100 meters with subsonic.
Yeah, and you said just the other week, someone who's never touched a gun before was shooting at 490 some meters. 457
meters with a 20 by 20 piece of steel. He'd never shot a gun before, and I had him shooting that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, with subsonic ammo, like people don't even think you can do it. And but yeah, with the right equipment, and there's all kinds of things. It's everything from the trigger to the twist to just the thought in the gun. The adjustability of the stock makes a huge difference for you to be able to fit the gun to you and be comfortable and be able to shoot accurately.
Right.
And to do these things without it becoming a heavy beast. You know, like the Honey Badger, the standard pistol's 4.5 pounds. Like some of the major companies that came out with knockoffs at SHOT Show, they weighed 6 pounds.
Yeah, and like this could easily be shot one-handed, like sitting literally like this, like
yeah, with an 8-power scope on it.
Yeah, like a big piece of glass on there, and you could hold it out for quite some time. So maybe this is kind of showing you guys how light this really is. So
yeah, the idea, I think, in a lot of times people equate like mass or heft or something to durability or quality, and like that's never the case. It's like when we start a project, we make a priority list, and based on what do we want this project to do, then we prioritize those. And then it's like, how do we get there? Like the honey badger didn't get from 6 to 4.5 pounds by us making titanium carriers or magnesium receivers.
Using ridiculous materials that jack up the price.
It comes out of everywhere, and I think there's a couple ways to do it. I can pay for engineers, or we can resort to stuff like that and pay for these exotic materials and marketing. And
and people oftentimes, I mean, no matter where you are, what you're talking about, people like to complain about price, but like you brought up, I believe, when we were doing the podcast, it's like, how much would you pay someone to take 12 ounces off your AR? Like, obviously there's a price on that. Like, depending on what you're doing with a specific gun, I would easily pay a couple $100 to have some weight shed off of one of my favorite guns.
Sure. Yeah, so it's like, do you want to pay for the engineering, or so the engineering can just get you a better product, and the products have to be more expensive. I mean, it's like when I said earlier, we had 11 people and we had more engineers than Daniel Defense, and like they're very expensive employees. And it's not just having an engineer, having the right engineers and the right team to work together to make the best possible product. And then it's my job to identify what that product's going to be in the priority list, and then they tell me what is possible, and then we try to do more than that. And that's sort of where we end up. But this gun, I think, is neat. It's a utility gun. It's versatile, modular caliber-wise. And some people will say, well, what am I going to do with that gun? Like, this is the most fun gun you will own, period. A single shot, so it's quieter than a gas-operated gun with a silencer. And with subsonic 300 blackout, like the Thunder Chicken on it, it's as silent as a Silence 22. And you can shoot stuff far with it, and it's just such a blast.
Big animals with it too.
Yeah. So you can hunt with it, and you'll have so much fun with this, even in your backyard with your friends at the range, hanging out.
Yeah.
It's a great teaching tool as well for first-time shooters. Like if you want to get your woman into like hunting or shooting with you, this with a silencer.
She would love that for sure.
Yeah.
So there you guys have it. That's what you get with an awesome team of engineers, people pushing innovation and just wanting to do some kick-ass stuff. You get products like you see here. So I guess that's all, man. Thanks for the time.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So there you guys have it. That was my brief chat with Kevin all about Q and the minifix, how he got his start, and the whole idea behind this thing. It really gave me a whole new appreciation for this gun. I already loved it, but now I like it even a little bit more. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, leave a comment down below. Let me know that you made it through this like half-an-hour video. And if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments, because I could do basically the same thing, but instead of the minifix, we could take a look at the Honey Badger, which is another one of the unicorn guns that has been on my list, but I don't have one yet. I would love to take one out and shoot it though, and speaking of that, I'm going to be taking this out to the range sometime this week, and I'm going to bring you guys a full Sunday gun day on the minifix in 300 blackout. So for now, if you guys have any questions, you can let me know in the comments down below. If there's anything specific that you want to see me do with this gun within reason, you can let me know, and hopefully I'll be able to incorporate some of those ideas into the video that will be coming out next Sunday. So that is all that I had for now. If you are new to the channel, consider clicking subscribe, because I make new videos every single week. And as always, thank you for watching. I will talk to you in the next one.